Hey, welcome back to the Positive Side Podcast. The host, Jeremy Todd. Glad you were tuning in. Man, these interviews just get better and better and better. And, if you listen to the last one with Melanie Holscher, overcoming cancer was just so powerful. And I feel blessed. I feel blessed to have a show like this that I can meet people and have stories like this to tell because I had this comment or thought in my head the other day was ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I love that because I'm an ordinary person. Melanie's an ordinary person. Danny Bader, the guy before that, ordinary person. But all these people that, because our names aren't in lights, because we don't have, a gigantic millions of people following us, doesn't mean our story is less important. And that's what I feel very, very blessed about having the podcast. So real quick, Jeremy Todd, the Positive Side Podcast. I've been doing this just about 4 years now. And again, the whole point of the podcast is to motivate, inspire, get you unstuck in life and get you to the next level. One of the things that I have and if you've read the book, if you read my book, if you listened to the podcast before, I have a soft spot for people that are going through tough times, and especially with addictions. With my cousin recently passing away from drinking, I had a good friend of mine that passed away from drinking. It's always on the top of my mind, and I always wonder to myself, how can I help people that are struggling with addiction, that are going through tough times? Not only, and I think there's several phases of this, not only beginning to start struggling, in the middle of the struggle, and then people are at the rock bottom. And there aren't a lot of people that come back out of that. My guest today is a personal friend of mine, and he's been through all these phases. So number one, Andy, hey, welcome to the show, my friend.
Jeremy, how are you?
Dude, I'm glad. I'm good. I'm glad you're on the show. I'm glad. And you know what, man, all bullshit aside, dude, I'm really, I'm thankful for you to come onto the show because, and we talked about this before we hit record. The whole point of the show is to help other people out. And your story is so powerful for multiple reasons. And one of the big reasons is that you've been through some tough times, man. I mean, you've struggled with addiction, went to prison, came out of all this, and now you're an absolute leader. We were talking about the other day, you're running marathons, you're doing these things, you're living the life that you always lived, and this, the struggles that you went through. So before we get way too far into the questions, and obviously I've already gone on a tangent and talked way too much, but Andy, tell a little bit about your story. Um, and again, this is a story that we've probably all heard 1,000 times, but this story is so important because there's a happy ending, and Andy is an inspiration. So Andy, tell your story.
All right, Jeremy. Well, hey, thanks for the opportunity to sit here and chat with you for 40 minutes. I know
Hell
you're
yeah, brother.
a very busy man.
In my own head sometimes, maybe.
So yeah, my story pretty much starts out. I was fortunate. I grew up a family, mom, dad, brother, sister. Things were great. Go through the tough times through middle school, trying to find myself, figuring out who I was, having a hard time doing that. End up partying, and that sort of was how I began to build my identity as a preteen teenager, and that's sort of what I was known as. And then once I was in high school, ended up a few months after graduation, continued partying pretty hard and was introduced to the drug cocaine. And it was literally probably about 3 months out of high school. I did it for the first time in my life. And from that first time till the next 100 days ended, it was probably the craziest 100 days of my life. Became an addict and was going down the rabbit hole real quick. And about 100 days after initially using, I was arrested in a small town and was arrested for dealing cocaine. And after that, about another 60, 90 days later, the judge in that town gave me a 15-year prison sentence for dealing in cocaine.
So you go from 100 days from you leave school, 100 days out, give or take, nonstop partying, nonstop, doing cocaine, and then you get arrested, you go to prison. Tell me, like, judge hits the gavel, bam. Andy, you are going to prison. What goes through your mind? What regrets? Who's the first person you thought of? Walk me through that situation. And maybe you were thinking, you know what? I'm a badass. I can figure it out. I don't give a shit. I'm going in and I'll be out eventually. I mean, what was the mindset thought about that?
Yeah, I think for the first 72 hours, that was the mindset. And then when you're sitting in that cold cell in the drunk tank and sitting in I think they call it the suicide squad. It's wherever it's a padded room, and you start to detox and you start sobering up and you start realizing, oh crap, I'm 18 years old, my life's over. And yeah, it was more of a scary time. I think that at that point in my life too, my mom and dad always was very supportive. And I think the toughest thing my dad said he's ever done probably to this day and up to that point for sure was instead of bailing me out when I called, he let me sit in that cell for a while to figure some things out. Um, and that was very well needed because no question, if he would have bailed me out right at that time, I would have went right back to living the life I was living. But fortunately, I did have about 60 days, 90 days between the sentence from when the day I got arrested to the day I was sentenced. And there was my parents bailed me out maybe about 45 days before my sentencing. So at that point, I was able to really do some reflection as whatever I could reflect as an 18-year-old kid. Like, okay, what kind of life am I going to choose from this point forward? And that's when it all started breaking down a little bit, and I realized that okay, I'm at a fork in my life. It's either I can keep going the way I'm going. This will be the life that I live in and out of prison, fighting addiction, or I'll take on the responsibility that I've got, or own up to what I've done,
Yeah.
and work, become better, and prepare myself over the next 4.5 years while I was incarcerated every day. That was sort of the mindset. Hey, what can I do today to make myself better for tomorrow?
Well, I think, well, it's interesting because I think you just say, "Hey, I'm reflecting," and you almost gloss over it, like it's just no big deal. And I would feel that like if other people going through these tough times, and again, thankfully and luckily, I've never been in your situation, but what made you switch your mindset? Was it the fear of being locked up? Was it the fear of your life being over? Was it the fear of the loved ones not being around? Was it the fear of dying? What was that fear that made you switch that mindset to saying, okay, I got to have a different outcome to the story? What was it specifically that made you change?
Yeah, I think again, after 72 hours, maybe a week of just like finally getting off drugs, again, through high school, from about my sophomore year till, yeah, that day I was arrested, there might have been a couple months where I wasn't using something. So again, that for 16 years old, that was some hard living, I guess, up to 18.
Yeah.
And then finally, I start cleaning out. And again, I'm still thinking in a haze, but I'm thinking somewhat sober. And my father was a entrepreneur, a businessman. I come from a family of businesses or business-minded people. Uh, my grandparents celebrated 70 years, 75 years of marriage before they passed away. I mean, it was so there was another example that I seen in life. And I guess as I sobered up, I realized, okay, either I can live this life, like I said, in and out of prison. I might not even make it to see my 25th birthday. I don't know. I knew how far I had went down a rabbit hole, but on the other side, I knew there was another way to live, and it was maybe more the fear of just disappointing my parents, the fear of disappointing my grandparents, the knowing all my from my baseball coaches to just a bunch of people that believed in me, letting them down, opposed to necessarily the fear of being in prison. It's just more of wasting my life.
So you go to prison. You said you did 3 years,
4 years and 7 months. Yeah.
4 years, 7 months. That day comes out. What is life like after 4 years and 7 months of being locked up?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked me that. It's especially with like this last year that we've been living with COVID and just all the new change and all that. It's crazy how the mind works. I remember when I was incarcerated, they give you a DOC number. My DOC number, Department of Corrections number, was 980-479. Without that number, you don't do anything. They refer to you. in the penitentiary as that number. It's not necessarily your name. It's just everybody's got a number. They call your number, you got mail. They call your number, it's time to go eat. They call your number, someone's there to visit you. So after 4 years and 7 months like that, you become, the term is institutionalized, maybe. Fortunately, again, I had a very strong support system. I had friends, that, when I say friends, not friends that I partied necessarily with, but friends that I grew up with who went on to college, went on and started to do things with their lives. They they didn't write me off. They stayed in contact. My parents, my brother, other family members, and so I was able to, through their encouragement, stay strong mentally
Yeah.
to keep pressing forward and not succumb to the fact that, yeah, you're just a number, and you know what, this is going to be your life, because it has a tendency of breaking you down like that.
I'm sure that I'm sure even to this day it still probably stresses you out, wears you out a little bit. I mean, it's interesting to go through that because you know, for me, I've never been through anything like that, and I would figure coming out, and I talk about so many times, when you go through some tough times and you come out, like who's actually going to be there. And it's a bad reference, but I talk about if you start a business, if you start a company, if you do anything outside of the normal and you come out, you're almost sitting on an island. And I'm just kind of curious, what kind of programs, like when you come out, what do you do first? Because I know there's gonna be people listening to this that maybe are locked up, maybe watching, listening to this on a podcast and saying, okay, now that I'm out, what do I do now? I've on my resume, it's gonna send 4 years in prison. I don't have a college degree. I don't really have a lot going for. I haven't even been around for 4 years. What goes through your mind there, and how do you get trajected to actually becoming a successful person in society? What goes through your head, and what do you look towards? Like, where does that deep down fire come from?
Yeah, for several years, probably actually, if I'm going to be honest, probably up to about this last year, which I'll get into later. There was always that chip on my shoulder. There was always that, um, yeah, I don't know. You got that mark on you. You're a felon. And fortunately, when I was released in September of 2002. There was one of my father's friends that owned a manufacturing company, and he gave me a job. So I was able to go there and work for the first couple of years, and sort of just go to a stable job. Um, and it did me well. I was very grateful for that stability and for that opportunity. During that time, let's see, this would have been in 2003. I decided to go back to school, and I worked on a 4 year degree in business. And in 2007, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in business from Indiana Wesleyan University. And I thought, okay, this is my ticket here, man. It's time. You got your degree, and hey, it's time to put things behind you. Well, I realized real quickly, even with a degree, you still have that felony on your record. It was very challenging, beyond challenging. I mean, a career was something that probably was just going to take place in my life because of the choices that I had made earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that, some people going through that stuff now at a younger age, or hell, even at 30s, 40s. And that's the thing about drug addictions. When you get into it, you never know what's going to come. For you, it happened at an early age, but it could happen at any time in your entire life. And that's what drugs do to you. They ruin that life. And but for you being an inspiration, going through that, going through the prison, going through the addiction, coming out, and then still getting the degree. Fast forward till today. So you've gone through all these things in your life. You've a successful business owner. You run a lot of different things. We met years ago when you came into the dealership. We started selling cars together. I mean, that was so much fun, and that's how I met you originally. I mean, shit, that's been probably what 7, 8 years now, and without knowing you, you would never. I mean, obviously I know you, but without that, no one would ever know that you've had the past that you have, and I think that's just so inspirational, and you are a light for so many people that are going through the tough times. So bring us up to date and talk about why this is important to tell your story.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times you think, hey, you get it all figured out, and you know, and then that's usually the beginning where it starts falling apart again. And I know, I think I probably met you in around 2013 or 14. I left it, yeah, I was in the car business in 2008, and then I was at a dealership until 2013. Like, so yeah, I met you in 2013. Around that time, I thought, well, hey, I never went back to drugs. That day when I was arrested in October of 1997, that was the last time I touched any narcotic, and I was done. Um, but then eventually, alcohol started coming to my life, and just like any addict, that's you start substituting one thing for another. And over the next 4 years or 5 years, probably from about 2012 to 2017, worked myself into becoming a full-blown alcoholic, and just not an alcoholic but a drunk. And so it wasn't all a pretty ending still at that point in my life either.
Yeah. And I think that's and I appreciate you being honest about that, because I think, being an addict is it never leaves you. It's always there with you. And you talk about, your drug addictions at such a young age, and I almost think for the maturity level, it's even more difficult the older you get, and then you become, an alcoholic, hardcore alcoholic. There's so many other things that your mind plays with you at that age too, and I can almost at this point you're letting people down that had the confidence in you were going to go back to doing this. You're letting your family down, your friends down. You're out of control again. And like, how did you let this? I mean, I can see these things going through your head, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it'd be almost like when you're the brief time that you're sober, saying to yourself, "Man, how did I let it get to this point again?" And for people out there listening to this, I know there's other people that are thinking about this, that have gone through tough times, that go back through it again. But yet you go through it as a kid, you come out of it, you go to prison, you come out of it not addicted to anything, and then you get into alcoholism recently, and then you kick that again. What made you kick it this time? And what's different this time than it was? I mean, what's to say that you don't do it again? Like I mean, and again, I'm asking you more for a friend more than anything, is 3 years from now, who's to say that you just don't start drinking again? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's a valid question. And I think probably loved ones and family members probably, if they haven't asked you, maybe they want to ask you, is like, Andy, yeah, you kicked it again, but are you going to do this again? What would you say to somebody that? And what's your mind thought when I ask you that? What's your mind process when I ask you that?
Yeah, it's a very humbling question and a very real question. And yeah, the reality is, I think when you're dealing with an addict, not even 3 years from down the road, it's how do I know tonight when we get off doing this that I'm not going to go and have a drink? I mean,
Yeah.
it it can fall apart real quick. I know for myself here in July 3rd, coming up July 3rd, it'll be 5 years of sobriety. I don't know what the math is where I'm at today, but it's been over, again, 4.5 years of being sober. And the last time, I think you touched on it just a little bit ago, as far as just the mental state. And I think when I was 37 years old, I rather, sometimes it's a funny story to tell, sometimes it's embarrassing, but 37 years old on a Wednesday night, I find myself beyond drunk at 8 p.m., walking into a local liquor store, telling the lady who worked in there, a 60-year-old woman, asking her if she's ever seen my Superman impression. And she hadn't. And next thing she knows, I'm in the cooler. I come walk out of the cooler, I'm just buck naked. And, the next day I woke up and I realized, okay, dude, listen, man, you're 37 years old. You might think you're a man. You keep saying, I'm a grown man, I'm a grown ass man. Well, here's the deal. You might physically be a man and you might be a 37-year-old man, but you're really a man child mentally. And I think that started to mess with my head there. Like, dude, it's time to grow up. I was at best still an adolescent. My emotionally, I wasn't catching up with my age physically. And then about 2 weeks after that, um, I started. I was like, okay, I'm done drinking that night. I'm done. Well, that lasted for about the day. And then that night, I think I was even drinking the following night. So, but then about 2 weeks later, same thing, just in a drunken stupor, went off on a gentleman who I have the utmost respect for. And I mean, I said some horrible things to the man. And that next day, which would have been July 3rd, I woke up and I said, "Hey, I've been pretty low in my life, and I never thought I would get that low again. But based on what some things have happened in the last 2 weeks, I'm probably the lowest I've ever been. It's time. I'm tired. It's that old adage. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired."
Yeah.
And that day, July 3rd, what I said I was done. And that evening, I wanted to drink again, but instead, I just went out and started running, sort of like a Forrest Gump moment. Took off running. But I only got about a mile, maybe a mile and a half, and I was just like out of breath. But I felt better after I ran. I was okay, well, and I didn't drink that night. And then that's sort of how then eventually I got into the whole running and biking and swimming, to where that's how I deal with my addictions today. I found a healthy way to. I still think I'm pretty much addicted. I'm an
Yeah.
addict, but there's a healthy way where I found to transfer this behavior.
Well, let's talk about that. So now you tried to con me into running the triathlon, and man, I love you to death, brother. But there ain't no freaking way. I swim like a rock. I run like a rock, and I ride bikes like a 5-year-old. I can't do it, but hey, I respect what you're doing, and I respect why you're doing it. And what would you say to somebody that has been through the same thing that you have? Is it hey, find something to you occupy your time? Is it find your why? What do you tell somebody right now that's listening to this podcast, wherever you are in the world, saying, "Hey, man, I have been where Andy's been, and I can't get out of this. I was addicted to drugs. Now I'm drinking. Then I got sober for 3 years. Now I'm drinking again." What do you say to somebody like to kick it once and for all?
Yeah, again, it's possible. And that's the thing, like with the Ironman, that's their slogan. Anything's possible, and I think a lot of times, so many times throughout my life, I always wanted to change for other people. But then comes the point where it was finally, I got to do this for myself. I'm tired. I'm just tired. And so I think another huge factor is back in 2010, I went to Haiti with a group of men, about 5 other guys, and we helped out with the earthquake aftermath that they had. And I met a gentleman there. He was 3 years on being sober, and he and I sort of hit it off. We grew up in the same community, but never really knew each other. And on that little trip right there, over the next 7 days, we sort of got to know each other. And we started meeting on a weekly basis. And he he had something that I wanted, and that was sobriety. And he walked with me. To this day, we usually meet. He started a new business about 6 months ago, so now maybe it's once a month. But up to that, we met on a weekly basis, a cup of coffee, and we just talked about life. And so many times, it was funny. He had a calendar for all the times when I said I was done drinking. He put an X on the day. And then about that following night or the next day, I'd call him and say, "Hey, listen, I fell off the wagon. I ain't gonna make it." So he'd go and cross it.
Yeah.
Yeah, at no point he stopped even doing that. But then finally, I was like, this time it's different, man. And he put the date on the calendar, and yeah, that date to this day has no X's on it. And I think I've got a very good core group of people around me right now, and that's kudos to them. That's where a lot of my sobriety takes place.
Well, I'm super proud of you, brother. And and like I said, I just know I know what you've been through. I know the struggles, but I'm more excited about the future. And I think it's the old saying, man. Why is the windshield bigger than the rearview mirror? You're always looking out forward. And you never want to look back. And sometimes you look back, and it's like coming out of a tunnel too. You come out of a tunnel, you look this dark, dark tunnel, but all you see is the future and where you're going to. So I'm super proud of you, and I don't know how many people have actually told you that, but man, I'm super proud of you. I love you, brother, and I think you're by sharing this message is going to change lives to understand that it's okay to to go through the things that you're going through, but it's not okay not to change. You've got to change. And if you fall off the wagon, that's okay. I mean, I don't, I think sometimes when we talk about the wagon, and again, I'm going to use some bad cliches, but the wagon's so gigantic that you feel if you fall off, you're never going to get back on. You're like, well, hell with it. I don't want to get back on that thing. It's too much. I've already lost so much. I'm just going to stay where I am. But you can always get back on it. And I think that's important to understand that I'm not trying to give people a free pass to go out and get off the wagon and go out and have a couple drinks. I mean, that's not the last thing I want to do, but understanding that it's hard and it's difficult and you shouldn't beat yourself up that bad to where you don't give yourself another chance. So like I said, Andy, I'm super proud of you, brother, and I'm glad you're on the show. On the show, I like to go through my 7 questions from John Maxwell's book. I don't know if you've ever read a John Maxwell book, but he's one of my favorite authors. He's written probably 40 different books, and he wrote a book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And he goes through these 7 questions. I'm going to go through them with you, my friend. So question number 1 for Andy, the man, the myth, the legend, Yergler is, Andy, what is the greatest lesson you've ever learned?
Yeah, the greatest lesson I think that I've ever learned is when you fail, own it, work through it, and people are forgiving people. And I think life's all about second chances, no matter what you do, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, whether it's parenting, you're going to fail. And it's how you respond to that failure. I like failure. I mean, I've grown, I've learned more as a person in my life. I think it's through the failure where you learn. It's where you learn. You learn through the failure.
Well, I like how you say own it too, because I think that's super important too. Hey, I screwed up. I went to prison. I got out of prison. I had my life kind of relatively together, and then I went and then started drinking, and I failed that too. But I owned that was my failure, and I own that. And I'm here to tell people that you can get out of it again, even after failing twice and owning it, because it's so important to own those failures. Because if you never own them, you're never going to identify with them. And I think it's important to identify with your failure too. Heck, the name of my book is how I overcame bullying and bankruptcy and a bad attitude. I talk about my bankruptcy. That was a bad time in my life, but I own it. It's who I am. It's brought me to this point where I'm a miser now. But I've learned my lesson. And when you own those and truly identify with that, that's how you really put that in the past and begin to identify your new true self. That's the exciting part about owning your failures.
Yeah, and I've got 3 children now, and my children know my story. And, they're 16, 14, and 13. And my my oldest, I mean, he's seen his dad drunk. Well, I guess all of them. My 2 have. We adopted a child out of foster care, and he wasn't around at that time. This was after I got everything put back together in the last 4.5 years. But they know my story. And when I said that earlier in the podcast, hey, I'll come back to that story of like getting that chip off my shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in August here of 2020, I went back before the judge again, and he expunged my record from my youth. And the kids saw that redemptive. They saw that second chance. They saw the fact that yeah, okay, hey, I know my dad screwed up big time. He came back to his community. He owned it, and yeah, he just pulled up his bootstraps, got to work, and people were willing to give him a second chance, and he made something of it. So that's
Again, it's setting that example. You know what I'm saying? It's being the leader, and sometimes leadership comes out of times of toughness and struggle, and I think that's where the old cliche. That's where leadership is developed, is through the tough times. And by setting that example for your kids and them being there and seeing that, they don't need to go through. I mean, they don't need to relive every single episode that you did, but they've seen you and they know what you represent now. And I think that's an inspiration to them as well. And again, that's why it's so important to have your message on here on this podcast, because with society the way it is now, and how many struggles are out there, people are struggling for money, so they're losing their jobs, they're sick. Um, Drugs are a real way to escape that, and it's not a good way to do it. There's other ways, like you mentioned, running the doing the triathlons that you're doing, and using that as an example to get rid of that negativity is so important. And that's why I say you're a leader, my friend. There's no question about that. Question number 2 is, what are you learning now?
Yeah, what am I learning now? I'm learning I'm getting old.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, no, it's I think again, well, we adopted a child out of foster care, and this child, he was born with spina bifida, and pretty much his mom and dad didn't want to have anything to do with him, signed off all rights. So that's how that all came about. But I watch this kid struggle on a daily basis. He never complains. So I think really over the last year or two, gratitude has been the biggest lesson in my life. And I think too, it's through the gratitude where I've been able to, yeah, again, just the growth. Because you realize, man, I'm not so sure life could be too much better, but I sure know it could be a lot worse. And just the fact of not dealing with like this, in my foster or my son's situation, it's like he's never going to know what it is to run up and down a football field or on the track or,
Yeah,
it's just like things you take for granted, man. Be grateful for, even if you think it's not much, man, 1,000 times more than the majority of people will ever have.
absolutely. And that, and goes back to what I talked about earlier. And these are the stories I love telling on this podcast, man. It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It's you and me, and we're meeting people like you that adopt children that are struggling, man. That's, look at the other side of that story. Like, how bad could it end up? And through the things that you've been through and the struggles that you've been through, you're still there to, I mean, imagine if you were still in prison. Imagine if you were chosen a different way. The lives that you would affect long term, not just when you were, if you go to prison when you're 18 and you come out when you're 25 and you go back when you go right back to prison, or worse, you're dead. What happens to your adopted son? We don't think about these things when we're going through the addiction, but the future that your life has and the impacts that you're going to make long term are so powerful. Yet we get caught up in our addictions, we get caught up in our ego and telling us these stories. Yet, man, you were a perfect story of that. If you're listening to this podcast and struggling, imagine what 6 months from now is going to look like. If you stay clean, imagine what 5 years from now is going to look like. This is an opportunity, if you're listening to the show, to change your path and do what Andy does. Use the talents and the skills and the love that he has to give, and not give it to somebody, something that's harming his body. So, again, much love for you on that. Question number 4 or 3, you kind of already answered it, but how has failure shaped your life?
I think it's made me totally who I am today. Again, I think we get this, we're told about this life that we can have. Every day we're advertised to, car salesman. We drive this shinier car, our life's so much more complete.
Oh yeah.
And hey, once you arrive, and I think what failure has helped me realize is I look back on all this, and not that I've arrived by any means, but I think you get closer to your goals in life, and you realize it's actually through this journey, it's through the failure that, man, this is where the good times was.
Yeah.
This was the enjoyable part of it, because once I don't know, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be nice to get where you're going, but at the same time, once you're there, then what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Question number 4 for my buddy Andy Yergler is, Andy, who do you know that I should know?
Oh, who do I know that you should know?
Yes, sir.
I know all the same people.
Well, give
Um,
me somebody, brother. Give me somebody.
Give me a second here to think.
I want to meet that dude that you were
I'll tell
talking
you
about.
something. Here's who you need to get to know. His name's Dennis Powell.
Okay. Tell me about Dennis Powell.
Dennis Powell works down at the Allen County Trustees. He's a trust or community trustee guy down.
Okay.
I don't know what street it is. Anyhow, yeah, I've worked with him. I used to have real estate rentals in Fort Wayne, and he has a lot of people come through his. I want to say organization. It's not an organization.
To
It's
the city or
a
whatever,
trustee's
whatever.
office.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's one of maybe out of 5 or 6. But anyhow, this gentleman here, man, yeah, the real deal. Just he sees. everybody is a human and as his equal. And yeah, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, he'll
Okay.
enrich your life.
Never met the guy, so I'll definitely have to reach out for sure. If you had an opportunity to connect us, that would be great.
Yep.
Question number 5 for my buddy Andy Yergler again is, Andy, what have you read that I should read?
Great question. One of the most transformational books that I've read in the last 2 years is a book by Jordan Peterson.
Oh,
Um,
I've already read that one. Well, maybe he's written 4 of them, I think.
uh,
Which
the,
one?
I want to say the 12 steps. It might be
12
the
Rules of Life.
12 rules of life and the antidote to chaos, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's actually through that book where I understood my alcoholism, and that also it's like the light bulb went off. Like, okay, this is why you can't drink no more, Andy.
Yeah, that's a great book. And one of the chapters in that book, he talks about if you see a stray cat, bend down and pet it.
Yeah.
I love that being one of your rules of life. But that book was a game changer for me as well. I listened to it on the audiobook, and he's got that voice that he's a very good speaker, but it's a super unique voice. But he's got a couple other books out that on my list to get, and I'm a big, and I'll probably get people that quit listen to the show because of that. But I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. I like his perception. I like his ideas. I don't agree with everything he says, but I agree with a lot of it says. But he tells his side of the story very, very well, and his book is brilliant. So I
You're a
appreciate you sharing
basketball
with that.
fan, right?
What's that?
You're a basketball fan?
Am I?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought another one I read, this was a couple years ago, but again, just man, full of gold nuggets, and that's Phil Jackson, 11 Rings.
Oh, I haven't read that book.
Have you?
No, I have not.
Check it out. Yeah, it's Phil Jackson. I mean, he lays out his, yeah, it's pretty much his biography over the coaching the Bulls and the Lakers. Compares Kobe with Michael Jordan and just the way he could maneuver these kind of personalities. And yeah, phenomenal book for leadership and a lot of gold
All
nuggets.
right. I'll put that on the list. I haven't heard that one yet, but I'm a big Phil Jackson fan. He's got a bunch of rings, and man, he's coached a lot of big attitudes and big names. So I'll check that out for sure. Question number 6, I think, is what have you done that I should do?
A triathlon.
Well, do you get
Well,
a it's like do you get a rhythm or a ribbon for finishing last place?
hey, just finish.
If I get a ribbon for finishing last place, I might. Do I get a life preserver while I'm swimming?
There are people out there on kayaks. There's
Do I get a life preserver?
you can wear one, absolutely.
If I wear a life preserver, I might be able to do one.
I'll swim with you.
Okay, well,
But
I
not
have to have a life preserver because I can swim a little bit, and I tell everybody the rule: I can save me, I can't save you, but I can swim a little bit. And if you pick one out, the other thing I'm not going to do with triathlon is I'm not going to do one when it's cold. The
no,
water has to be above. I mean, give me an 80-degree water. I'm not jumping in cold water. I'm out.
they, they
Um,
they do one here at the Fort Wayne in June at the YMCA over by Homestead, and it's in a pool.
okay,
Yeah,
that might work.
that's the whole way.
That might work. I might be able to do something like that. And if you remember,
Almost laps.
you hold me accountable. And if it's in a pool, and it was an exercise bike that I got to ride, or I actually hit the road.
We jump on a bike. We'll go ride 8 miles,
I
and then
can
we'll
do
go
that.
for a 2 mile jog or a walk.
Okay, I can
We're
do
just
that.
gonna finish.
You
This
hold
is,
me accountable. I'll do that.
that's what makes the sport so great. It's sort of just like life. Just finish.
All right, you hold me accountable. I'll give you my word. I'll do it.
All right. We're gonna get
That'd be
someone to
great.
film it too.
What's that?
We'll get someone to film it.
Oh, there's no question. Heck yeah, I can figure that out. That's the easy part of it. No doubt about that. Maybe Comedy Central might want. Question number 7. Final question for Andy Yergler is, Andy, how can I add value to you?
Actually, yeah, when I was scrolling through Facebook probably about 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, and I saw you promoting your book, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Just again, knowing you, some of our conversations we had in the finance office
Yeah.
over Don Ayers, and yeah, just and then seeing you here reconnecting and seeing, yeah, wow, this is awesome what you're doing, inspiring. It goes both ways. There's a I don't know if it's a biblical proverb or if it's just but it's, hey, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah,
I mean, we all have stories, we all have failures, we've all um or we all don't, but a lot of people,
I
they
get
go
it.
through those failures. You can teach through them, you can learn through them, and I think, yeah, just seeing that, and I can't wait. I'm waiting for my autographed copy, man.
I ordered the 100 books and they're not here yet. And if you go on Amazon right now, you can have one in within 3 days. It's great. And I hear so much pullback from that, but it's part of it, and I can accept it, and I can handle the people saying, "Where the hell is my book?" It's all good, but I appreciate you saying that. And one of the things I want to talk to you about, and since you're saying that, it's interesting that you talked earlier about uh, your support group, your network. Adding people like you to my support group is extremely important to me, and that's one of the reasons I do the show is that I've been very, very blessed. I have one of the most off the hook, strongest contacts in my phone that anybody could ever imagine their entire life. Like, I have authors, speakers, business owners that because of this, because of you know introducing myself to people and having people like you on the show, it only makes me stronger. So when you say that, I add you to the group. I add you to one of those people that I can lean on, that I can reach out to, and if I have questions or concerns or something comes up in my life, I know somebody. I can always reach out to my man Andy Yergler. When you reached out the other day, I was like, man, that's super dope. And I told you when we met for coffee, and it was 20 degrees. And I was actually going to see my cousin the last time I saw him alive, and he passed away 3 days later.
So,
Um, it's times like that I'm like, you know what, this happened for a reason. This is a meeting for a reason, and I'm glad you're a friend of mine, and I appreciate your friendship. And I'm just, again, I'm so proud of you, how far you've come, and the lives that you're going to change by being on the show is extremely important as well. So just don't take that for granted either. So listen to the show, share the show, and all that good stuff. Andy, if anybody ever wants to find you, how do they find Andy Yergler?
yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I'm in a new adventure in life. So on we have a food truck we go around in also. It's D&D Fish. That's on the Facebook if you want to try to find me there. Um, and obviously through you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to, if you want to get hold of Andy, and if you are struggling, and you want to need some help, need some questions, need someone to talk to, I promise you, with everything I love, Andy will respond back and help, because that's why I wanted Andy on the show, and that's why he's on the show. It's to help inspire other people that are going through tough times. And again, let's look at it from a 5,000 foot view. This cat was partying like a rock star in high school, uh, started doing cocaine, got locked up, went to prison, came out, kind of got his life back together, started going down the right path, screwed up, got an alcoholism, screwed up again. I mean, but here he is right now, got his life back together. And it's an inspiration, and people need to hear this story, because I guarantee you there are other people out there like you that maybe have gotten out of prison and then maybe gone right back into prison and maybe made bigger mistakes. But that's not the answer. That doesn't have to be the story that's written for you. You can write your own story, and Andy's writing his own story, and we're witnessing it right in front of our eyes. So, Andy, I appreciate you being on the show, my friend. It means more to me than you know, and I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure you share the episode, share it to a loved one, share it to a friend. Run over to YouTube if you can. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I'm really working hard on building that YouTube channel up. I mean, like I have 103 subscribers, 104 subscribers. I'd love to get to 1,000 subscribers. How cool would that be? But again, I want this to be a place where you can go to get motivation, inspiration. You can go to the Facebook page, check it out. We got close to 12,000 people on that, so that's obviously, the momentum is there. So that's exciting. But again, it's the whole point of the podcast. The whole point of the show is to inspire people to get through tough times and understand that you have greatness within. Appreciate you listening. Like always, this is the positive side.